Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. So what I'll do today, I'll be talking about statement of work. What's the best way you can work with the statement of work? Now, if you worked mostly in a consulting firm, right? Because you might often hear this term statement of work, very common if you're working for a consulting firm. So I've worked before in my past life for a big four consulting firms, and I've done statement of work in the past, even from an architecture perspective. I was doing a dual role, and I was involved in pretty much a lot of work, including being a developer, being an architect, even building a statement of work for a company of work. So I have fairly good understanding of what statement of work means. So I'm going to tell you from my experience. So statement of work is a kind of a contract, if you ask me in simple terms, that you sign between a customer and the company who's going to provide you the service. So for instance, if you wanted to build, let's say, a part of functionality in the Salesforce, let's say let me give you an example, right? Let's say I'm running a practice, right? I'm running a practice where we use extensively Salesforce, and we monitor, teams' performance using Salesforce, KPI metrics, and we bring in new leads using Salesforce. Right now, let's say we have a requirement to build, say, custom flows and few dashboards, and we wanted to look out for a consultancy firm who can assist us, right? So, so we invite a consultancy firm. They often end up in doing a discovery workshop with us, and go and work with our subject matter expert to understand what exactly we're trying to build, and who will be building it, um, who not who will be building it, who will be involved from our side. Ours means from a customer side, so they can start the development process and the pricing model. These all things are important when you're talking about the statement of work, right? So what does a statement of work actually means or contains, right? It's a legal contract in simple, like I said, right? That which describes the kind of work a business, a consultancy, or a vendor will perform for you, and the number of resources that will be involved to undertake the task, and the time involved to deliver it, and the pricing model, right? You can go for a fixed price, means that a project may cost, say, $100,000 for a month, with a team of, let's say, two developers and a functional tester and a BA. Or you can use a time and material, means based on an hour, or as much you charge based on the number of work that's been done, right? So that's like, I've worked on a statement of work where we use the time and material. I've worked where we've used the fixed project, right? So, and this needs to be agreed between your customer as well as the vendor who will be doing it, right? Let's say if you are a company, want to build it, so you need to agree with the customer. This is the things we want to build. So let's take a step back, right? Obviously, I don't want to jump the gun and confuse you guys. So I give an example where we are running a practice where I wanted to build, where practice wanted to build certain flows and dashboards, right? So we are hiring, say, a vendor to do the job for us, right? So they gave us a statement of work. Statement of work says that two developers will be involved, and it will take, let's say, a month, and the testing will be done from their side, and maybe we can give a project manager who can coordinate with the developers to make sure that things are done on time, because it's a fixed project, right, for a month. Now, I, as a customer, might say, right, hey, I have a requirement to say build flows. Can I add extra field to it? Can I add this field to it? Can I add that field to it? So your statement of work should exactly mention what all the piece of work, functionality you'll be building it, and there should also a clause what happens, if something goes beyond agreed terms and conditions, right? There often happens. It's not the case that never happened. It happens pretty much every single time, right? I've seen that from my experience. Um, so um, that is, you need to consider that, right, from that perspective. And you also need to have a clause. What happens is one of the parties decides to break the contract, right? Let's say business decides, look, I don't want to do stuff with you anymore because I think there's a performance issue and I'm not happy with the stuff you're building. Or if, for instance, or the vendor says, hey, the two people who are supposed to work on this project that decides to leave, I don't have a resource anymore who can do the work for you. So what happens in that kind of scenario, right? So you need to add those under terms and conditions, right? So that's where it's very important. So the statement of work is just not it's not a simple piece of a document. It is a kind of simple piece, but I'm saying it's just not a piece of a paper you write to say, hey, XYZ functionality I'm building, here you go, this is invoice, sign it. That's not how it works, really, right? It goes beyond that. A lot of legal implication comes into equation when you're talking about statement of work, right? And also the reputation of you as a customer, as a reputation you as a vendor, that comes into picture as well, right? So you need to factor that, right? Because I often seen when people talk about statement of work, they kind of narrow down to, hey, I wanted to build this functionality. These are the developers I got. These are the functional testers I got. These are the code, right? That's pretty much it. That's not pretty much it, right? And you also need to, you can generate another statement of work from a current statement of work. So what I mean by that, you could go to a customer and say, hey, we're going to build it, and do you need an extra piece of a you need an extra resource to train you guys or for support purpose. Like, what if something goes wrong? Do you need an extra resource, which like a standby, a developer who can fix bugs for you in the long run, kind of stuff, right? So you can pretty much work on an extra statement of work. I've done that and it worked in the past. Right now, I'm no longer involved in building statement of work because I mostly I do a lot of things, right? You know, if people who knows me, I do a lot of things. I write books, I work, I do consulting as an architect, and also basically I do consulting for a government agency. So I'm the enterprise technical architect for the marketing cloud as well as for the Salesforce platform. So I am responsible for pretty much what goes into this platform and anything that get built on top of it. So without that, my approval, things it's not going to move. So which is good, and it comes with a lot of responsibility, right? Uh, so I no longer do statement of work, right? Though it's a pretty interesting, thing to do. And most of the places, account executive, they get involved in the statement of work, right? Normally architects don't do it, but I have done that. It's an exception case, right? Because the place where I was working, I was the main guy doing pretty much everything. So testing, development, architecture, statement of work. It was a small startup. I was engaged in the past, right? So it was an opportunity, got to know a lot of things, right? So, yeah, so I think that's a brief overview about what statement of work is about, right? Now, let's look at some of the trailer stuff, right? Because it's obviously uh, helpful when you can go through extra content. Um, okay, so when you look, there are different templates that out there. You can look for a statement of work. It just, you can Google it. You will find many of it, right? Just see what works best for you, right? If your company has never dealt with the statement of work, right, you can use an existing template. There are a lot of templates, like I said, which is out there, and build on top of it, right? And yeah, and work with your customer. Most of the time, customers are very flexible. But don't expect your customer to write you the statement of work, right? You should be doing it, and then you can take it to customer to say this is the work, and they can review it. Okay, so statement of work defined. So what's the best practice for statement of work, right? It's a legal document. It's established as a baseline. That's what change that's to be done. Defines what's going to be done, when and who's going to do the work. It's done together, require multiple conversation. Obviously, when you present a statement of work, it won't get approved straight away, right? Customer might have some questions, it goes back and forth. At times it takes 10 iterations to get this stuff approved. It's, you know, so well, the people often get confused statement of work. They often think it's a sales pitch document. Not really, right? It's not a marketing material. It is not about your roles and responsibility, right? And it's not, like I said, it's not a sales pitch. It's you're trying to address a customer problem, and so you're articulating that in the form of a document, saying this is what we're going to help with. These are the resource who are going to help, and this is a pricing model. That's all to it, right? And so before the statement work that needs to before you make a statement work, right, you need to do discovery, rough order of magnitude, and proposal, and then go with that, right? So that's in a very nutshell of what a statement of work is about. Now, obviously, in a statement of work, you need to raise a difficult conversation. Customer may not have a clear understanding of end-to-end journey, right? Obviously, they understand the domain very well. They could be a subject matter expert, but they might have missed certain technical aspect of it, right? I mean, for instance, they might be considering using Flow, right? Whereas they have a license for Omni Studio. So you could say, hey, instead of Flow, we can use Omni Studio. So that kind of conversation, right? And then the question might arise: we don't have any in-house talent to make any modification to an existing, velocity component or Omni Studio component. So that's where your next conversation: do you want a standby resource? So generate a second statement of work. Excuse me. Or you can squeeze that into the same, right? So it depends. Um, and so, like I said, it's a legal document. Keep all the work, customer stakeholders involved. Scope usually training, change data, post go live support, right? As I mentioned, data migration, integration. So things that you're going to build, right? You can build in a separate section. And you just need to understand what will be the customer responsibility and what will be the team who building it will be responsible for, because it's very important to have that open and transparent communication, because customer might have certain expectation around these things I want, and vendor might say, hey, no, we don't want to do that, it's not agreed. So you just need to make those things agree, right? And so uh, the things which includes in your statement of work: roles, timelines, travel expense. If there's one, sometimes you have to fly the consultant. Like for instance, I was involved in one of the Australian projects, so I have to go to Sydney a couple of times to do work. So I used to go there, stay there for a week, and do the implementation. Sometimes consulting, mostly the implementation time I used to visit there to see if you got any glitch or if they need any kind of extra hand. So often the implementation time, and there was a time I remember around like 80 years ago, I used to visit like Sydney um, pretty much like week every 2 months. It's like for instance, I go in Jan, stay there for a week, then I have to go again on March, right? Then again I have to go in May, so something like that. It was a bit hectic, and I didn't really quite enjoy it. So that's why I don't really like to commute much, because you can call that I'm domesticated if you wanted to put it that way. When I was a bit younger, I used to travel a lot, right? I used to travel different parts of the world. I get bored and just pack my bag and just take a flight and go. So that's kind of approach I used to have. But now, nah, I'm kind of domesticated, right? If you know what I mean. I prefer to stay in a place, my small town, do my work, add value to the community I live, add value to the company I associate with, and focus on my business. That kind of stuff I like to do. Right, commute takes a lot of time, right? So sorry, I digress. My apologies if you think this guy ran too much. My sincere apologies. Um, okay, so terms and condition. That's the one thing I said is very important. Things can change, so you may have not anticipated. The customer might say, "I want this stuff done," right? And you say, hey, it's not a part of the change order, right? But that's now you need to maybe it might be a very tiny change. So you might say, "Hey, we can do it." So when you say we can do it, will that become a norm for the next statement of work, right? So you need to capture those kind of things, and the warranty, and what happens if something goes wrong, right? So um, and always, that's where the scope creep and kind of stuff, you know, and yeah, and always ready to defend your statement of work. So that goes back to the conversation where I mentioned you might have back and forth iteration with your customer. You might say, I think this will cost this, and customer says no. It takes only 5 minutes to build it because customers think everything is rosy, right? So um, they say how hard it could be, just a tiny line of a code change, right? So I mean, these days I often tell to developers, right? Hey, it takes only 2 lines of code. Why are you telling me it takes like 8 hours to build it? Not really, because the reason why I understand how the tech stack work, but the customer won't. When customer says, unless they're technical, right? That's a different conversation. So if a customer is very technical, then the customer might say, hey, that's not right. I think it will take 2 hours. So then you should be able to defend it, right? If you think it's going to take 8 hours, you need to justify why it should take 8 hours, right? So that's very important from a statement of work. And this is a very important piece of document. And if like I said, if you're a consulting practice, you will often engage in building a statement of work. Otherwise, how are you going to do work for a customer, right? So yeah, and from a certification perspective, they may or may not quiz you on this, but like I often say, is that don't just learn something because you want to go and clear the certification. Certification is important, right? I'm not denying that, but that shouldn't be your core reason why you should be learning Salesforce just to get certified. You should be learning this technology so that, or for that matter, any tech stack, so that you can add value to the business you're going to associate with in the future, or you are associated with at this stage, or to your own company you are working with, or you wanted to build, right? So it's all about value at the end of the day. That's all about any technology you're going to work with. If you can't add value, then it's pointless, right? So statement of work is one of the important component of any delivery cycle. So that being said, that's all I wanted to cover in this episode. Hope you guys have an amazing Thursday. Adios.